Mother of the Blue Wolf, a Mongolian epic. Fractured Empire, Book 3. Written by Starr Davies. Narrated by Blake Robertson. Dedicated to Lori, for your very early enthusiasm for Mandukhai's epic story. Chapter 4. Through the Orange Haze. Mandukhai propped her chin on Unabalad's chest, studying every angle of his face in a way she had never done before. The strong, angular line of his jaw, the way his upper lip seemed to sink back beneath his facial hair, the sharpness of his cheekbones. Two little crests of skin formed valleys between his eyes toward the bridge of his nose. She loved every detail. The fingers of one of his hands trailed along her spine as the other hand rested against her arm. Neither of them spoke as they lay together. Waves of passion had consumed the night, banked by slumber until desire woke them once more. Mandukhai had never lain in his arms for so long before, always aware of the danger of his embrace. Now, no one could stop them. Mandul would not kill them. No one would report them. For the first time in her life, Mandukhai truly felt free to do what she wished and choose whomever she chose. It brought a small smile to her lips. The wolf dawn approached. Mandukhai saw the subtle shift of hues from black to deep blue through the smoke hole. As hard as they might try to cling to this night, the sun would still rise and steal their moment away. I did not sleep nearly enough for the ride ahead, Unabalad noted. His chest rumbled as he sighed. I fear I may never sleep again with you in my bed. Mandukhai giggled. When was the last time she had laughed? She could not recall. Then I am doing something wrong. He smirked, sliding his hand up into her hair and pulling her closer. Or very right. Unabalad's lips brushed against hers. Somehow, his kiss contained just as much explosive desire as that first one had. Mandukhai thought her heart would burst from all the love she bore for him. How had she ever doubted him? Ojral, Mandukhai thought, and all the desire shifted into anger. She pulled back, pressing her forehead against his shoulder. What is it? He asked, once more running his hands freely over her skin. Her. He lifted her chin, and his dark eyes pierced her soul. I told you, nothing happened. Nothing will happen. I'm not sure she will accept that, Mandukhai replied. She doesn't have a say in the matter. I will figure out what to do with her after the sun rises. Right now, I would rather figure out what to do with you. Mandukhai jerked back a few inches. He intended to be the one to decide how to punish Ojral? His hands fell back, but he still did not let go. He hadn't let go all night. You will decide? Mandukhai's jaw twitched. Her fingers dug into his chest as anger heated her words. Unabalad, she disobeyed me. I am Queen Regent, not some common woman. Unabalad appeared amused, which only stoked Mandukhai's anger. Why was he amused by this? Mandukhai, don't let your jealousy cloud your judgment, he said. She is from my tribe, and I will deal with it. Mandukhai's brows shot up her forehead. She sat up. For the first time all night, his hands fell away from her skin, and her skin turned frigid without his touch. But her anger still warmed her. Is this how it will be, then? She asked sharply, pushing him aside so she could reach the edge of the bed without climbing over him. He would surely pull her into his arms again if she did that, and Mandukhai was uncertain that, even angry, she could ever resist him. Why are you irritated with me? Unabalad propped himself up on his arms, adopting a bewildered expression. He reached for her, but Mandukhai swatted his hand away. Because you may as well have slapped me with your cock to prove you are a man and I am not. she snapped. If that is what you prefer, I'm more than happy to oblige, he joked. Mandukhai turned her furious glare at him. He shrank back. Did he really think so little of her? She had thought he was different, that he at least respected her position, unlike most of the other men in the camp. This judgment was hers to make. Oduril had lied to him, which deserved punishment, but she had disrespected Mandukhai in open defiance. Unabalad studied her as she glared at him, obviously perplexed. Then he sighed and all the potential humor in him slid away. You're right, he admitted. You are Queen Regent, and it is within your right to determine how to deal with her. I just worry that you will let your jealousy guide you toward a poor decision. And you think so little of my ability to form judgment, she said. Mandukhai spotted her deal on the floor and leaned forward to grab it. Unabalad grasped her hand, stopping her from gathering her clothing to dress. Don't put words in my mouth. You know exactly what I think of your wisdom. He grasped her arm just firmly enough that she could not pull away as he leaned toward her. Maybe she didn't want to pull away. His lips brushed her shoulder. Then he swept her hair away from her neck, leaving a blazing trail of kisses along her skin. And if you become Great Khan, will you dismiss me so easily? She asked, leaning into his touch despite her anger. This time, he jerked back, his hard eyes locking on hers. If? The harshness of his tone sent a chill down her spine. You know what I mean, Mandukhai replied. Unabalad slid his hand off her back, sitting up straighter. Anger made the scar across his eye and cheekbone more severe. Do I? Because you have still not given me a formal agreement, and now you say if. What should I think? Mandukhai realized that he assumed, based on their history, that she would simply hand control of the nation over to him. But she could not make such a decision with her heart. This is what Mandul wanted, he reminded her. In the absence of Aborigine heir, yes, I know, Mandukhai sighed. Should she tell him the truth? If Batu did not survive Sai-Chai's treatments, it would cause Unabalad pain for no reason. Deep down, Mandukhai knew this boy was the entire reason she had not given Unabalad the agreement he wanted. She worried about Genghis's warning over the future of the nation. Only he of my bone will have the might to hold it. No, she could not tell Unabalad yet. Mandukhai dipped her chin against her chest. It makes me feel like a prize, like little more than a queen for a Khan. The warmth of his body once more pressed against her back, and he leaned his forehead against her temple. You are far more than a prize queen. His breath rolled down her cheek. I promise I will never dismiss you the way Mandul did. I know the kind of woman you are, and I would be a fool to ignore that. Mandukhai turned to meet his gaze, and his lips captured hers. He was powerless to pull away again. Once more, they fell back on the bed and let the fire consume them. As the passion died down, and their moans and cries of pleasure no longer pierced the air, something else penetrated the sanctuary of Unabalad's jair. Mandukhai's chest heaved as she felt the rumble, then heard the cries. Before she could speak, Unabalad withdrew from her, dressing faster than she had ever seen anyone dress before. Unabalad. Mandukhai reached for her clothes to dress as well. By the time her deal was over her shoulders, he was already at the door with his bow and sword. Stay here, he said, as he jerked open the door. Mandukhai didn't protest. Unabalad disappeared into the darkness beyond the jair, slamming the door shut behind him. She heard his commands clearly. Stay. Protect the Queen Regent. Those last 4 words would confirm what everyone already suspected. She had given herself to him. What have I done? The panic at that thought vanished the moment she smelled smoke through the opening in the roof. Mandukhai jumped to her feet and rushed toward the door. Esige and Nameku were out there. She threw open the door only to confirm what she already knew. Mongol Bulag was burning. All the bliss of the night vanished the moment Unabalad stepped out his door and saw the light from the fires burning on the western edge of Mongol Bulag. He shed the skin of a man of passion and adopted the cold warrior's face as he rushed toward Togochi, who lingered near Mandukhai's chair. "Where is Mandukhai?" Togochi asked. "Safe," Unabalad said. "What happened?" "I'm not sure yet, but the horns of watch never sounded," Togochi replied. Unabalad understood what that meant. They were under attack, and whoever it was had killed the men on watch, probably the scouts as well. One of Unabalad's servants approached with the reins of his mount. "I was looking for Mandukhai," Togochi said as he climbed into his own saddle. "Where is she?" "Rally the men and have them fan out in all directions until we can determine the extent of the attack," Unabalad commanded, ignoring his question. "Concentrate the heaviest forces in the west." Togochi reached over and seized Unabalad's arm. "Answer me!" Unabalad yanked his arm away and turned his mare west. "Settle down. She's safe in my jar." Togochi raised a brow. "All night?" "Is now the time for this?" Unabalad snapped. "You take the north, Soke will take the south. We will leave Alai Tung behind with enough men to help put out those fires." Unabalad did not wait for confirmation before he raced west, where the fires rose into the sky. Screams pierced the air. The thunder of hooves rumbled from all directions, making it impossible to discern where the attack originated or where it was headed. Men ducked out of his mare's path and swiftly mounted their own horses to follow him without command. They rarely needed command for such attacks. Every one of them understood the danger and would follow him. "Secure the camp, rout the attackers," he thought as he readied his bow for battle. The scent of burning felt permeated the air. Women and children ducked for cover in jars and under carts laden with possessions, ready for the ride they were supposed to begin today. Despite the rumble of thousands of hooves against the ground in all directions, Unabalad could hear no telltale signs of battle, such as the clash of swords or whistle of arrows. Mandukhai strode out of Unabalad's jar only to be blocked by her own guards. None of them budged. In the far west, Mandukhai watched the flames cast an orange glow on the horizon. Who would attack? "Go back inside, Queen Regent," Arslan said. "It's the safest place for you right now. We will guard the jar." "I will go where I am needed," Mandukhai snapped, pushing past him. Arslan seized her arm and pulled her back, nudging her toward Unabalad's door. "Apologies, my lady, but Lord Unabalad has ordered us to see to your safety. This is the best place for you to be." Mandukhai yanked her arm free of his grasp, pulled her knife from her belt. She thrust the point against his chin. "Touch me like that again, Arslan, and it will be the last thing you do. You answer to me, not to him. He is not Great Khan. I am Queen Regent. Now step aside, follow me if you must, but do not dare to stop me again." For a moment, no one moved. Arslan gave a small incline of his head in agreement, careful not to cut himself on her knife. Mandukhai tucked it away in her belt and marched past them toward the gathering tent. The guards closed in around her like a shield. Hopefully, Esige would have the sense to take Nameku to the gathering tent. Smoke drifted into camp from the west, creating a thin haze. Warriors hustled around on foot, darting around to carry out commands, though who gave those commands Mandukhai did not know. As she reached the gathering tent, a surge of women rushed out the door, accompanied by an arban of 10 men. Mandukhai sidestepped with a swish of her deal to avoid being trampled. The inside of the gathering tent had already transformed into an impressive hub of activity. How long had this attack been underway before she and Unabalad took notice? Alai Tung's shoulders relaxed slightly as he spotted Mandukhai approaching him. "What is happening, General?" Mandukhai asked, glancing at the woman and a handful of men who moved with clear purpose. We aren't certain yet, Ala'itung reported. The creases in his face put his worry on display. Fires started on the western border. No warning was sounded. Lord Unabalad has taken most of the men and rode out to investigate. Jaghan hustled over, her hair in disarray. The infant girl was slung to her chest, and she clung to the hands of both of her sons, dragging them toward where Mandukhai stood. Mandukhai, are we under attack? She asked as she settled the boys near the dais with some toys. Togashi rode off with his men as if we were. I don't know. Where are Nameku and Esige? Mandukhai asked. Dread spread through her chest. Ala'itung waved toward the door. She went to help organize a group of women to put out the fires. She dropped the boy off in the corner there with the other kids. Bokeh, Mandukhai called. The guard jogged over. Go find Esige and protect her. Take Torgus along with you. If anything happens to her, I will hold you personally responsible. Is that clear? Yes, Queen Regent, Bokeh and Torgus said in unison. Mandukhai nodded in satisfaction as the two rushed out of the gathering tent to follow her orders. She turned to Ala'itung. Until we know more, we need to gather all the elderly and the children who cannot help here in the gathering tent. Ala'itung, I want you to organize a ring of warriors to protect this location. As she gave her orders, Mandukhai shuffled toward the children's section of the gathering tent. A dozen young children were gathered together as older girls attempted distracting the children from the chaos around them. Mandukhai's gaze swept the group. Everything slowed. The air grew thick. Panic made her hands tremble. Nameku? Mandukhai asked the group, but she knew already. Nameku wasn't among them. Chapter 5. Queen for a Khan. By the time Unabalad reached the line of burning jars on the western edge of camp, smoke filled the air, obscuring his vision. More than 1,000 of his men were now at his side. He commanded them to spread out between the jars and seek signs of anyone who did not belong in Monkey Bulag, and encouraged the rest to travel toward the center of camp where it would be safer. Despite the thrill of battle, Unabalad's heartbeat remained steady, his breathing even. He held an arrow on the string of his bow as he guided his mount with his knees, but would not draw until necessary. As he rounded a burning jar, Unabalad spotted a line of women working tirelessly to retrieve buckets of water to put out the flames and prevent the spread. A few dared to move toward patches of burning grass with cloth to smother the flames. Esige bustled among the women, her bow strapped over her shoulder as she organized the entire operation with a regal bearing that reminded him of Mandukhai. He galloped toward her. Esige, what are you doing? He demanded. Same as you, I suspect, she replied, hauling a roll of felt off a wagon. It isn't safe. Go home. Esige dropped the felt beside one woman and turned to his mare, smacking her flank and making her lurch. You first! Unabalad maintained control of his mount. Arguing with her right now would be pointless. He commanded 10 men to stay and protect the woman, then wheeled his mare toward the milling mass of shadows on the western horizon, accentuated by the shifting hues of blue as the wolf dawn began in earnest. An army. He raised the horn around his neck to his lips and sounded the alarm. Soke and Togachi would know to come to him here. Then they would rout this army. Or destroy it. Could this be Biggerson attacking to get his son back? It was a coward's move to attack in the dark while the camp slumbered, and Biggerson had never struck Mandukhai as a coward. But amidst the chaos in the gathering tent, it would have been all too easy to smuggle Nameku out. Her heart sank. If Nameku fell into his father's hands, Biggerson could attempt using his son to strengthen his bid at Kurotai. She could not allow that to happen. Organize the women and children, Jagan, Mandukhai commanded as she rushed past them toward the door. Alayutung, protect the women and children. Where are you going? The general called after her. Mandukhai motioned for Aslan and the rest of her guards to follow. Nameku is missing. She darted out of the gathering tent with her 5 guards. Before she went too far, Mandukhai stopped at her chair to retrieve her bow and quiver. She would not be surprised, and she would not hide while Nameku was missing. The weapon felt familiar in her hand. As she hooked the quiver on her belt, Mandukhai noticed the overturned clay jar she kept the extra sweet curds in. Nameku had a weakness for curds. She moved to the jar to investigate and noticed a trail of crumbs. Mandukhai followed the trail to the door, praying it would lead her to the boy. The trail moved around the back of her chair, spotty and trampled by feet, but just enough had been left behind for her to follow. As she wove toward the east between chairs, Mandukhai noted how few men remained in this part of camp. Women and children darted from this chair to that one, gathering supplies to use or herding children out. A few cowered under a nearby cart. Mandukhai stopped only long enough to talk them out of their hiding places and encourage them all to collect in the gathering tent, where Jaghan should have been organizing everyone. She asked after Nameku, but no one had an answer. The rally horn sounded once, twice. Mandukhai spun in a circle to pinpoint the direction. The horn sounded once more, a sure sign that an army had been spotted. Would Biggerson use an army as a distraction? Uncertainty rooted her in place. We should go back to the gathering tent so Lord Unabalad and Lady Esige know where to find us, Arslan suggested. Mandukhai knew better. They would not come looking for her. Not until the battle was over. For better or worse. Shadows moved between 2 chair, then 3, 4. Mandukhai turned, swiftly realizing they were surrounded as the warriors stepped out of the shadows, bows raised. Lower your weapons, Mandukhai commanded. The attacking men laughed, and the sound curdled her stomach. Arslan and her guards abandoned the command to get her horse and instead formed a defensive ring around Mandukhai, bows drawn. That's her, one man said. Mandukhai cursed herself for not readying her own bow, a mistake she would never make again. Where is Nameku? She demanded. Who? The man asked. Her stomach sank. Before she could lift her own weapon, the whistle of arrows filled the air, flying in both directions. The surrounding ring closed tighter as 2 of her men were hit. Neither fell. Mandukhai struggled to see past the wall of bodies around her, but could see nothing more than the backs of their black armor. One of her men pitched forward. For just a moment, Mandukhai saw the men who attacked. They had far more dead but still outnumbered her guards 3-1. The narrow gap in her circle closed, guarded now by only 4 bodies. They edged toward a nearby chair, forcing her to shuffle along with them. They are hurting me inside. Who lived here? It was so close to her own. General Alaitung's family? Her arrival would cost them dearly. Hopefully no one is there right now. Arrows continued to whistle through the air in all directions. Another of her guards fell, spinning from the impact of an arrow in his eye. He died before he hit the ground. Unabalad rode at the head of the army, a vast line of men as far as he could see in either direction. He had still not identified the attacking army, but it was safe to assume it would be Oirat. They already stirred near the border toward the west. Horns sounded commands up and down the line, echoing his own sharp blasts. As the men rode hard toward the western horizon, Unabalad watched the dust cloud kicked up by the force they pursued. He squinted through the haze of dust and dim light of the wolf dawn to identify what this force intended. Why attack Monkey Bulog only to turn and run the moment Unabalad pursued them? Was this a diversion? And if so, to what purpose? At least I left men back to protect the camp, he thought. It gave him the freedom to pursue these aggressors without worry. Soke's southern forces had already swung around wide to meet up with Unabalad's. The Korchin commander nudged his mount close to Unabalad. My Lord Khan, we should turn back. Unabalad glanced at Soke. How many did we leave to protect the camp? As many as we could spare, but not enough if they circle back, Soke said. He spit dust out of his mouth, soot from the smoke covered Soke's face. Did Unabalad's look the same? Unabalad nodded and slowed his pace. His horsemen matched his pace without command. Soke was right. If this army circled back to Monkey Bulag with them always on the back of their primary force, the camp would be virtually defenseless, even with the La'itung protecting it. Send word north to Togachi, Unabalad commanded. He will take his men back to block the south and east. They can't attack from the north with the mountains and forest blocking their path. Not without giving themselves away. To be sure, you will take your force north and sweep away any who might flee in that direction. Unabalad also hoped the crisscrossing patterns would make his forces appear in a state of disarray, allowing him more time to take them by surprise. Soke guided his mount up the line toward where Togachi commanded his men. Unabalad kept his gaze forward, searching out signs that the dust cloud had shifted in either direction. In less than a minute, Togachi's thousands of horsemen broke away to the south, toward Monkey Bulag. In a foot race, there would be no way to catch up to the men who fled his army. The horses would be evenly matched. One advantage he had was that he knew this land far better than the enemy. Heading straight west would lead the army into a wall of mountains they would have to scale. But if they turned south, there would be a passage through the Kangai Mountains, right into the heart of Oirat territory. This would be their target. Unabalad yanked his reins and sounded the command horn. As one, the line of his army followed his lead. He would cut them off at the pass, or he would force them to stand and fight. Esige paused to catch her breath, swiping her sleeve over her forehead to mop up the sheen of endless sweat. It beaded on her scalp and made her hair stringier each time she brushed her stray hairs back from her face. The fires were dying down now, and her back ached from the lifting and dumping of buckets of water or moving heavy felts to smother flames on the ground. Bokeh and Torgus had arrived a few minutes ago, attempting to escort her back to the gathering tent. Esige had refused. If the other woman could be there to fight the fires, she would be as well. Mandukhai would understand. She would have to. I'm perfectly safe with you two loitering in my shadow, Esige had insisted. Movement from the corner of her eyes caught her attention. Esige dropped to her knees and snatched her bow as well as an arrow from the quiver. In seconds, she had an arrow drawn, aiming it under a cart where she saw the movement. In a huff, she released the tension and slid the arrow back in the quiver. Nameku, what are you doing here? You should be waiting in the gathering tent with the other children. Tears streaked his face and he clung to something in his fist. Esige eased toward him, reaching a hand out. Nameku wormed his way out from under the cart and threw his arms around her neck. I want to be with you, he whimpered. Esige folded her arms around his 5-year-old frame and rubbed his back. It's okay, but we should get you back where you are safe. Mandukhai will be worried sick. She knew the moment she returned to the gathering tent, no one would let her leave again. But she couldn't do her duty out here if she worried about Nameku the entire time. Arslan grunted as another arrow thumped into his armor. Mandukhai hated using him as a shield, but only one other guard remained. The jair door pressed against her back. Go inside, Arslan hissed under his breath. We will hold them off as long as we can. Cut the felt and slip out the back. Then run. Don't stop until you reach the gathering tent. Mandukhai wanted to protest, but she knew there was no point. Arslan's purpose was to protect her. He would die fighting off these men. They outnumbered her 2 remaining guards, 5 to 1. "Go with the spirit of Tengri," Mandukhai said, offering the only final prayer she could in this dire moment. Arslan fired his last arrow and drew his sword as Mandukhai ducked inside. The jair was blissfully empty. With only the bed and stove, it seemed a barren thing. Mandukhai breathed a sigh of relief. She had been worried that her appearance in the jair would lead to the death of whomever occupied it. If this was Alaitung's jair, as she suspected, it was so hard to tell in the chaos, his family would already be with him in the gathering tent. Mandukhai rushed to the back wall. She cut the straps holding the lattice in place using her hunting knife, then sawed through the layers of felt, praying to the high heavens to watch over her. The sounds of fighting diminished outside, and she knew time was wearing thin. She would not get far if she did not get out of here soon. At last, her knife punched through the rest of the way. Mandukhai turned sideways to slip through the narrow gap. Cool air slammed into her lungs, but did nothing for her pounding heart. Rough hands seized her arms from behind, and Mandukhai screamed, twisting to break free from the firm grip. The hilt of a sword rammed into her back, sending Mandukhai sprawling on her knees. The sudden jerking motion wrenched at her arms, still held firm by her attacker. As the attacker edged closer, she recognized his Oirat colors immediately. Mandukhai spit in his face as he crouched in front of her. She yanked at the hands holding her as they bound her wrists together behind her back. The leader sneered, wiping away the spit on his cheek. "You warned me you were spirited. I'll have to break that before you reach him." "Who do you serve?" Mandukhai demanded. Had Biggerson sent these men to capture both of her and his son? "Where is Nameku?" "You will see soon enough." He pulled out a felt sack poked with holes. "What do you want?" she asked. "A queen for a Khan," he replied, then slipped the sack over her head. A Bankar dog leaped from the shadows, sinking its teeth into the meaty flesh of one of her captor's arms. The man screamed and let go of Mandukhai. She attempted fleeing, but hardly managed more than a step before blinding pain shot through her skull. Mandukhai blinked. The dog yelped and fell to the ground. Someone yanked a sack over her head. The last thing she saw before being plunged into darkness was the dog. Not just any dog. She identified the color pattern around the dog's nose. Kilgore. Unabalot's dog. Another hammer against her skull plunged her into unconsciousness.
If you enjoyed this sample, click the links in the description to hear more. Do you want free audiobooks, ebooks, or autographed paperbacks? Join me on Patreon at patreon.com/szdavies_character-assassin. You'll gain access to my Discord server, behind-the-scenes updates, merch, and so much more.